I'm delighted to have you with us again today. Our listeners, we know that there's a lot of podcasts out there, and we're honored that you give us our time. If we ever, as a society, need conversations to happen in a real productive way, it is right now. And today we have Dianna Anderson, co-founder and CEO of Cilliant, and her specialty. I mean, she's got massive lifelong experience. She's a master certified coach with International Coach Federation, which is the highest certification that organization can grant, and it is not an easy one to get. We are going to dig in today to a lot about conversations, not about coaching as much, but about the importance of conversation. So Dianna, welcome to our program today and can't wait to get started. But first, would love to hear a little about your background so our listeners know what brings you here and why you're passionate about what you do.
Oh, thanks so much, Carl. Great to be with you. Yeah, I have, interestingly, a long history with both coaching and change. I started my career doing huge re-engineering projects back in the early 90s, and then transitioned to the profession of coaching before it was even a thing. I started coaching in 1995, and I'm a founding member of the International Coach Federation, and actually went on to co-write one of the first textbooks on the ROI of coaching. And that process kind of got me looking at coaching as a system. And I really came to appreciate that just everybody in the world needs coaching skills, which made me a pioneer in the creation of coaching cultures. And as I have helped people around the world step into the kinds of conversations that they're avoiding, I've become more and more interested in how we can just use these kinds of conversations to unravel the kinds of complex situations we find ourselves in today. So that's my passion, getting people to talk about the sticky stuff and making things happen.
Excellent. Before we get into the conversations, I do have to just ask for your expertise. Our our listeners are mid to upper level leaders, mainly within healthcare, and some of them really have to battle. Usually, if they're listening to this, they know the value of coaching in whatever way we define that. But they're many times up against people up the food chain, as you might say, who run
Mhm.
the budgets, who look at them and say, coaching is an investment we really can't afford to make. If people want to change, they can change on them by themselves. Could you address your most recent knowledge about, is coaching really worth the investment? Is there an ROI that's measurable? Thoughts on that?
That's a big question. Um, Absolutely. There's an ROI when coaching is done in a way that ignites insight and moves people into action. So there's just so many expressions of coaching.
Mhm.
Um, I know. So here's maybe a different way of thinking about it. I would invite those leaders to take a moment and consider the cost of a conversation that doesn't happen. Two people that don't come to agreement, so a new initiative never goes forward, or people who don't talk to each other about a challenge and therefore it overtakes them. What's the cost? You know, just check out the ROI of those conversations and imagine for a moment if those conversations actually happened, what the return on that small investment to learn how to have a conversation with each other would be. I think it's astronomical. We just don't look at it that way.
Yes. So a perfect segue into where I think we'll spend most of our time. Um, the cost of the conversation that doesn't happen.
Hmm.
And boy, that just opens up a whole panorama. But talk to us about conversing about the sticky stuff, like you mentioned. So many people are absolutely paralytic when it comes to having the sticky conversations.
Sure.
just in a situation yesterday where we were dancing on the surface until some questions were asked that dropped us down. It was dicey for about 2 hours, and
Hmm.
then to see them pull through it. So, guide our listeners today in both the deeper thinking behind tough conversations in any way you want to design it, Deanna or Diana, and then some practical items that people can use even today as they walk away from listening. So, take
Sure.
it away.
Well, I think the best place to start is to understand why we're struggling. I mean, I think it's hard to solve an issue if we haven't actually kind of unraveled what the issue is. And my observation is that our approaches to conversations right now are really, in many ways, anchored back in the last century when the world was much steadier. And the truth is, what we were trying to change and manipulate were things, processes, and so we could have conversations that focus more on fixing things and forcing things, and that worked well because you can do that with a thing. But if you look at the kind of things that we're really struggling with today, they're not often things. They are people. Because as our world has become more complex, as our challenges have landed one on top of the other, on top of the other, as we're constantly trying to adjust to an environment that is just constantly in a fluid state, it's getting people to think and to act in new ways that actually moves needles forward. But we don't have approaches to having conversations that inspire people to choose to change. And that's why when we apply this old technology, just force it or fix it, to these new situations where we need people to work together, think together, create together, we end up in just kind of a mosh pit. So that's our challenge, is we have to recognize that increasingly the challenges that we face are about getting people to think about things and look at them in a different way. And so the way to approach this, first of all, is to consider, okay, well, why would people choose to change? And people choose to change when they believe that they are going to benefit some way by doing something differently, and they need to believe that they can achieve that benefit and that whatever risks they need to take are going to be worth the reward that they'll receive. So it's a really different mindset to even begin a conversation with. And so, if we're going to inspire people to choose to change, we've got to get super curious about how they see the world. So, one of the things we teach at Cillian is this concept of worldview. And the idea that every single human being has their own unique window into the world. They have their own worldview that was created from all the things that they've done in their lifetime. And as a result of all those experiences, everybody has their own assumptions and beliefs about how the world works. And when we are entering into conversations where what we want to do is inspire someone to look at something different and ultimately to take a risk to do something different, we have to begin by exploring, how do they see the world? What do they care about? What would they be interested in doing differently? Um, so that's kind of a beginning part to your conversation. Let me turn it back to you and see where you'd like to go with this.
So, let's just take it to a situation that I recently witnessed.
Mm,
Um, Two individuals, one in their early 50s, male, one in their late 20s, female. If you tried, you could not create a more different worldview between two people. It's
yeah.
just, I mean, oil and water, black and white, night and day, completely separate. Uh,
Mm,
how, and again, back to our listeners who need ideas on what they can use today, because
mm,
most everyone listening knows people within their organizations that are just like the two I'm describing. How would you help them to start going to your point that people will change when they see there's a benefit for them?
sure.
How how do you inspire that view? Because I'm coming to you, as it were, in this hypothetical. I like my worldview. It has protected me well.
Sure.
I really feel that I'm right. and thus was the 50-year-old yesterday. Really solid. What would you do to help him see the other person's worldview?
Well, I probably want to get a little bit curious about what's important to him right now. And I'm assuming that he's the decision maker. Is that accurate?
No, they're
Oh, no.
actually they're
They're peers.
yep, peers.
Okay, so this is such a common situation now where you've got two peers that need to get onto the same page in
Mm,
order to kind of be able to move forward with
yeah,
something. So, well, the first thing that I would say is that my guess is whatever they're trying to move forward, it's not going to be a one and done decision. Is that accurate? That it's something that's going to
absolutely.
change over time. So I think the first thing that we've got to do is start thinking about change more as a journey than an event. And I think one of the reasons we get stuck initially is because we want the decision or we want the thing to happen or we want that like we think we're going to get the end result in one conversation and therefore we get frustrated because there's just in my language too many knots to untie at once. So our approach is called that we use is called untying the knot. So the first thing that I want to do is think about what's the first knot that's keeping these two folks from being able to be in a respectful and productive conversation. And my sense is the first one is they do not even really see each other quite yet. That they are so in their own worldviews that they're not really being able to kind of bridge the other's perspective. And so, my what you want to do is just set an intention for that first conversation. It might be find some common ground. This might be what can we agree that we both care about? What can we both agree would be important to move forward? Or it could be even just help me understand how you see this and why whatever is important to you, and just allow both of them to begin there. And what we want to do is start to just have some shared understanding and build enough trust that we can move to whatever that next knot might be, which might be they do not see the problem in the same way. They maybe, and I would encourage them to figure out, well, what's that first knot that you want to focus on? And the cool thing about approaching conversations by untying knots is that the more you kind of find a little agreement, you go, okay, yeah, I could see that, or I could see this. And it's like, okay, cool, we got something to build on. And we're building trust as we build insight as we go forward so that by the time we come to take action, we understand each other enough and trust each other enough to take the risk to do something differently.
Excellent. I'm curious, what a perfect um, metaphor for sticky conversations
Mm.
in a knot. Give us a little background on how you came up with that. That is brilliant.
Thank you. Well, when I had the insight, gosh, back in the early 2000s, that everybody needed to have coaching skills, the challenge I faced was at that time, most coaches received about 200 hours of training. And the most I could get anybody to give me in a training situation was 8 hours. So I had to figure out how to take the essence of what made coaching work and invent some way of having people be able to kind of wire up this new way, not only of having conversation, but thinking and do it in 8 hours. And so I was just experimenting with people, just trying to teach people things and just seeing what stuck and what didn't. And the honest truth is, I was in a conversation with someone and I was listening to her to having a coaching conversation, and she was just like throwing questions at the wall. And I'm like, well, where are you going with that? She goes, I don't know. I thought, well, there's a problem. And I thought, okay, how do I, fair enough.
Love that.
How do I give you something that would, like, I thought, well, how do I think about it? And I think, well, I think about it like knots. And I'm like, yeah, okay, untying the knot. That's it. And then honestly, a couple of clients later, one of the senior executives I was teaching looked at me and said, are there different kinds of knots? I'm like, indeed there are. I like, yeah, let
Nice.
me think about it. Yeah, there are. And so Untying the Knot was born based on conversations with real people in real situations.
How do you, I mean, that is just my mind's racing right now of all the different ways you could use that. at
Mhm.
the beginning of a conflict resolution meeting because it instantly brings the mind. How do you
Mhm.
use that when you're dealing with sticky conversations yourself?
Well, if I'm dealing with a sticky conversation, the first thing I want to do is get very curious about the other person and how they see the situation. Because I know that whatever they're doing, it makes sense to them in some way. And they either have got one thing, they either are like their strategy's bad, like whatever they're doing is not working, or they're frightened and they're protecting themselves. I know it's going to cut one way or the other. So my first thing is, are they just bad strategy? Are they not, is it they think they're doing something positive, but it's just not working anymore, or not working the way they think, or are they protecting themselves in some way? And so I'm going to approach the conversation differently depending on which way I think it goes. If I think someone's frightened, I want to understand what they're afraid of. I
Mhm.
want to understand what's at risk for them. I want to think through how can I help alleviate some of that risk to help them maybe move forward in some way.
So, a couple of things going through my mind. Um, I love that approach and learning from it myself because I do a lot of conflict resolution.
Hmm.
I need your guidance here for our listeners. That's easy when I'm well, easier when I'm coming in as a third party and asked to be there.
Hmm.
I can see some of our listeners, even myself, thinking, that's great, but when I'm one of the two parties involved,
Hmm.
and I'm not coaching it, I'm not facilitating it, I am head to head, toe to toe with someone who is adamant about their position.
Hmm.
What suggestions do you have for putting the pause on, stepping back, putting that fight or flight on the shelf, and becoming curious? Walk us through that.
Well, I think it begins actually just frankly with how you approach the conversation. So when I do this, I want to get super centered. I'm going to spend time getting myself like untying my own knots first and trying to come in with an intention, a positive intention. And I will state that, it might be, I just want us to try to find some common ground today, or my goal today is just to understand where you're coming from. Or I think I might try to acknowledge a shared intention. I might acknowledge, I think that we both have whatever's highest interest, at
Mhm.
at heart. And so what I'm trying to do is find some kind of common ground, something we can put a stick in the ground or stake in the ground around that we could move towards. Um, and then I just really want to listen to how they're thinking about something so that I can understand how to maneuver within it. If you both come in and you're both off balance and you're both ready to fight, it's going to be a fight. So it was interesting. Many years ago, I'm not going to remember the person's name. Anyway, it was in the early days of emotional intelligence, and I heard one of the speakers talk about the calmest person wins. And they talked about an experiment that they had done where they got really cantankerous people to come in, and they had on one side someone who was super cantankerous, and the other side they had someone who had been trained as a monk for years. And they put them in a conversation, they wired them up, and they found that if that it didn't matter how, you know, upset the other person was, if the monk never let go of their piece, that the other person would slowly entrain to them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I always aim to be a foundation of calm in a conversation. And if I can't be, then I'm not going to enter into it. Well, the biggest mistakes I make is when I didn't get to that place and I enter the conversation and I get caught. It's like a term that we teach people in our coaching in the moment workshop is like you get caught in your own emotions and then it just spins up into a mess, which creates a whole lot more knots.
Absolutely. So I can imagine some of our listeners thinking, yeah, but Carl, Dianna has been doing this for decades. She's a master certified coach. She can go to calm in a heartbeat. I'm not there. I get wrapped up in the emotions. She talks about being centered. Carl, ask her this question. What, and I hate this word because it sounds a little trite. Can you give us some techniques that you use to go to calm?
100%. I mean, you're right. I've studied all kinds of different meditation and all those things. And honestly, I'm not that fantastic at it. Like there. um, yeah, but I will try. But here, I recently actually purchased a heart math monitor. If you don't know what heart math is, definitely go out and check it out. It's one word, heart math. They are some of the original people that were doing uh, research into heart mind coherence.
Mhm.
And that I think is really the secret to almost everything. If you look at most of the people who are kind of I don't know, doing
Mhm.
interesting things in this space, they're all talking about the science of heart math coherence. And you can train this in as little as 5 minutes a day. But the cool thing is about the monitor, you put like this little monitor on, and then they have little tutorials on different ways that you can learn to bring yourself into coherence. But you literally get a readout on your phone. So it shows you how you did. You can go back and look at, like, oh, yeah, that's where I lost my train of thought. You'll see it. And you can get data, like over time. So you can train yourself. And like literally, it is feedback that will train you how to choose to be calm in the moment. So, best thing I've seen out there for just practical, you know, data driven folks that want to see how to make a difference in their lives.
And so, again, just for our listeners, and we'll put this in the show notes, it's the word heart and the word math together.
All
Heart.
one word, heart math.
Okay.
Yeah. And some of the best and oldest research on on mind, heart coherence, which is not meditation. I just want to be really clear. This is not a form of meditation. This is just an actual way of bringing yourself into coherence, which is a balance. And that is the most powerful place that you can be. Um, and if I could put a plug in for balance for just a moment, because
Please.
a lot of people think it's sort of a, well, that's kind of a wussy kind of balancy thing. No, who wants to be balanced? No one can be balanced. And I'm just going to tell you, my background: acrobat, gymnast, dancer, competitive into my 20s. Balance is power. When
More.
you can hold your balance, and dynamic balance, I'm not talking static balance, but I am telling you, when you can maneuver your own balance through any kind of waves or any kind of disruption, you will have more power than anybody else. It's just balance is power. So train it.
Oh, okay. We got to dig in on this one. This is fascinating. Um, Help me understand the difference between static and dynamic balance. Give us some definition there.
Okay, well, imagine a beam. So most people could imagine a balance beam that a gymnast is on. So a static balance might be you pull yourself up to a handstand and you hold it. And you've got to be able to move every single little part of your body to hold that thing.
Mhm.
But dynamic balance is when you start to move, but you got to keep your balance if you want to stay on the beam. If you want to throw a big leap or do a trick, you still have to be able to keep yourself in balance, which means that every single part of your body has to work together and it has to be able to course correct in the moment. And that is about understanding. It's about understanding through the system. And frankly, that's my vision of what leadership should look like. Really fantastic leaders are able to balance both sides of themselves, the human side and the technical side. They're able to balance themselves in turbulent situations. I just really believe that dynamic balance, which is balance that's moving, is um, is where the power is.
Absolutely. That is first the knot as a marvelous metaphor, then the dancer on the beam or the gymnast on the beam. Because I'm a nut about watching the Olympics, and of course, I date myself here, but I remember when Nadia Comaneci back in 1972 hit the first 10.
I remember I was there too. Man, she was part of what inspired me to. I was already doing gymnastics by then, but
But
yeah.
I can see her right now. I can close my eyes and see that iconic photograph of her before she dismounts that 10. And so, as a former gymnast, what did you do that taught you that balance, and how can you help our listeners extrapolate that to their day to day? This is powerful.
Well, for me, practically, I think what really helped me was that I didn't just do one thing. So I took dance, I studied acrobatics, which is actually really about very fine balance. Then I was also a gymnast. So I ta tapped into a lot of different kinds of ways of using my body, which gave me a virtuosity um, that I think was harder to attain if you only go for one thing. So, what I would say to your listeners is we're looking not only for physical balance, but even mental balance. So, one of the things I do is just tap into a lot of different things when I'm reading. Like, don't just read the same thing all the time. Like, read different headlines or look into different ideas or just listen to how other people are saying things or expressing things or what they care about. And I find what creates balance in our thinking is really just our ability to go in and look at different things. Doesn't mean you need to believe it all, or it doesn't mean you need to be an advocate for what you've read, but I'll just read from a bunch of different things to balance how I think about things. So I don't know if that's helpful, but I would
Absolutely.
say in whatever venue you are in, there are multiple facets of how to understand a reality. And the more of them you have a grasp of, the more virtuosity you have in a conversation, the more places you can go to express an idea, um, the more ways you can express an idea that someone else might be able to hear. I'm going to give you a, I don't know, this might be a, this is the example that just came to mind. It was really old, but
Please.
I was working with a leader once and I was kind of complaining about some of the people that reported to to him, but I knew he had a very strong religious background. And at one point I just finally said, you know, Jesus did not get the A team. like he got he just got the people who believed in him and he had to turn them into a team and they did great. Like you got to think of it more like think more like that. and,
Oh
and
man, that is excellent. I love that.
So,
Uh,
but I couldn't have done it if I hadn't, if I didn't know a little bit about Christianity. But also, if I didn't understand what mattered to this person, I knew that if I gave him an example in an area that he had value for, he was far more likely to consider it than if I gave him my rationale for, why he should be leading differently.
Absolutely. So that segues us into some of your other work, um, which, again, using a phrase that I've gone over, building resilient, adaptive teams through meaningful dialogue. Um, I'll just go down a quick tangent here, which is one of my rants that too many times, and Wall Street Journal even came out on this a couple of years back,
Mm,
saying that American industry spends over $300 billion a year in team building activities, few of which can show any sustainable difference. I just was talking to a colleague, his team's having a retreat next week up in the mountains of California.
hmm
And I'm thinking, I wonder how much of that will extrapolate to success when they leave the retreat. Um, so I love this thing about transition or transforming resilience through meaningful dialogue, not necessarily fun little games that are fun but don't move the needle. So talk to us about change through meaningful dialogue.
Well, untying the knot becomes a shared language. And if you think about it, most teams fall apart, again, going back to what I kind of opened with, because they use these old, antiquated ways of having conversation, which is we fight it out, we battle. Who's got the right answer? Who's right? Who's wrong? It's, kind of a zero sum game sometimes. Like there has to be a loser if there's a winner. And when you kind of rewire your thinking and say, oh, what if we were actually all together untying knots? That was our job, not to defeat each other, but actually to rise together to the challenge of discovering knots. And so what I found is when I've taught teams untying the knot and then have them use that language to take on challenges. And what's cool is instead of, pointing fingers at each other, they focus more on, all right, what are we not seeing about the situation? Um, let me give you an example. I had a change management team once that was trying to implement some new technology. They were really stumbling, and they literally came and took our coaching in the moment workshop just to have a shared experience.
Mhm.
And the bonus they got was they learned untying the knot. And they went back after the workshop and they sat down and they looked at their project and they said, "Huh, there's so many things we didn't see about this." Like, or so many nuts. Like, we did not see that we didn't share why this mattered with the group that, the um, division we're trying to implement with. And we talked about do not want nots, which are fears and concerns. And they were able to articulate how they ignited a lot of fears and concerns. And they also could see they hadn't really built the skills that people needed. So, untying the knot became a shared language that helped them, instead of blaming each other for why this was failing, identify these kind of leverage points where they could work on change together. And what I've discovered is that when people do that together and then take action together, they build the kind of trust that it takes to take on even more complex issues. And I mean, what is resilience in a team other than the ability to talk about the things that are challenging and trust each other enough to take some action, to learn from that experience, and trust that when they come back and learn from whatever happened, whether it went well or not, that they've still got each other's backs and a language to talk about what happened and how to learn from it. I mean, that's, to me, foundationally what resilience is all about.
So let's take it down one level deeper.
Sure.
I work in situations where sometimes the animosity is so strong. I won't say hate,
Mm,
although I think I'm being nice. The animosity, Diana, is so strong that even getting them to talk civilly, much less productively, I mean, it's not sticky, it's just I can't think of a word that describes it well. How do you
mm,
get people that are so antagonistic with agendas that are deeply held, um, not historically, but more recently?
mm,
They have decided to be thoroughly offended, and they throw the word around of trust very loosely and many times inappropriately because the other party hasn't done anything to truly violate trust, but it's certainly made the other party uncomfortable.
mm,
With your decades of experience here, how do you get parties that know they have to get higher in their functioning, but right now they're curious only to find out ways that they can shoot the other person down, not how they can help him land safely. Guidance?
yeah. Well, a bunch of ideas. What we literally, I have actually had people who were like, had been butting heads for years go through, again, coaching in the moment, our workshop where we teach untying the knot. And I heard an amazing story once where two of them who had hated each other for a very long time walked out, looked at each other, and said, "You and I, we have knots and we need to talk about them." And they literally used untying the knot as a way to sit down and kind of like try to figure out where they disconnected and how they might be able to work together more effectively. And that ended up actually rippling through both of their divisions because they were heads of divisions. And they were able to find common ground by using untying the knot as a way of finding um, shared places where they could connect. The caveat I would put on this is intention. If you have to have the intention to actually try to find a better way to do something or to actually try to resolve it. If your intention is actually only to cut somebody else down or then um, then this approach isn't is not going to meet them there because they're not in the conversation. Like, if you're not in the conversation, if you're not committed to the conversation and a positive outcome from it, then there's no basis for the work. Um, so that would be my caveat. As long as there's, I think, an intention to find a shared good and some kind of path forward, you might not, it might have to take a while to kind of build up the trust to get there. But I think the foundation is there if the shared intention to try to find a good outcome exists.
You said it earlier, and I think it's a point that I need to get back to, that many times people, when they're not wanting to have a productive conversation, are afraid. And they hide that in what we might call now bullying.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but underneath, they are afraid of something.
Yes.
So Diana's been asked to come in and mediate a situation, help to have a meaningful conversation. How do you get Carl, who is afraid and is showing his fear through antagonism, posturing, but you sense that underneath that maybe success may be lurking?
Mm-hmm.
How do you get me out of that posturing? Help me see my knot and move forward. How do you do that?
I think the most important thing is whomever is going to have that conversation has got to come from a place of compassion. I think the greatest challenge we have dealing with fear in our world is that fear is really sticky. When someone is acting out in that way or, trying to keep you back or away or, belittling, it's so easy to get caught up in that. And, one of the things we teach our students is that whatever people are doing, it makes perfect sense to them. And when people don't see a positive way out, they go to defending each other or defending, excuse me, themselves, and they're going to pattern that after whatever they've learned is the best way to do that. And so you've got to be able to just stay quietly, not feel affected by it. And
Mhm.
kind of, I always say I want to see the person behind the fear. I always think of the Wizard of Oz, which is like, don't look at the little man behind the screen. Look watch the screen. Don't look at the little man there. And I'm like, you got to look for the little man, the little person that's hiding behind the big facade, and see if you can get them to trust you enough to share what they're most concerned about. But that will only happen with an open mind and an open heart to just have some compassion for the extent of fear someone must be in if they're doing some pretty wild things. So,
So as you know, listeners, we're talking to someone who has coached and facilitated at the highest level. Um, and so when she uses compassion and empathy, probably just not throwing around words. So with that set up here, Diana, I've been in rooms where literally I've seen the eye roll and the head shake of, Carl, we just need results. We have grown-ups and adults here. And you talk about empathy, you talk about compassion. I think we just need to get through this by doing our jobs. We can be warm fuzzy in some other place, but right now, let's just do our jobs. I'm sure you've had that sense in some of your meetings, yet we know from the research that compassion and empathy are huge in order to
mhm.
bring people to the table. So, how do you convince Carl, the hard nosed chief operating officer who runs all the purse strings, that Carl, compassion and empathy affect the hard bottom line? How do you address that when there's such resistance?
Well, I think the conversation I would have with them is that their jobs have changed, but they haven't changed with those jobs. It's just I wouldn't maybe say it exactly in that way, but again, kind of back to what I was back it used to be when all we did was manage things, make processes more efficient or invent something, and like
Yeah.
that was all about things, and people were just slotted in or moved out. And but if you look underneath, here's what I would say. A couple of things. One, usually by the time they're saying that, whatever is going on is really complex. Like there's multiple, crises landing one on top of the other. There's a million moving parts, and they really want to go back to a day where the life was more predictable. They just want to know what's the answer and how do we do it. And but here's the thing: the definition of complexity, my favorite one that I read in I think a Harvard Business Review many eons ago, um, is that complexity is actually a situation that happens when there are so many inputs, you can no longer predict the output. It's impossible statistically. So, what that means is our job is now untying knots. It's like we have to figure out which knots we're going to untie first. And it's things are not usually in knots, it's people. Like, I think what a lot of people really just have not fully grasped is that it is now people that drive change. People thinking about things differently, people being willing to take risks together. Then now the moving part is people, which means the moving part is what people believe to be true and their ability to think and create together. That is our moving part. But the old approaches that we have that work on things have the opposite effect on people. Ask anybody, would you like to be treated like a thing? They're like, no, thank you. And they won't change. Like people don't change when you treat them, when you tell them what to do and punish them if they're wrong and try to force them. They will do the opposite. Not only do they do the opposite, but when you need them to create and take risks, like when you put that kind of force on them, actually fear makes people protect themselves. It causes their brains not to be able to work as well. It causes them not to want to take risks. It's the opposite of what we actually need right now. Happens when we take that stance. And that's the thing that people are just not putting together um, particularly well. And I have empathy for why that is, because I was around back in the 90s when change was a choice and change management really was a thing. You could manage change. And gosh, wouldn't it be fun to go back to those days if we could? Because it felt great to be in control. But they're gone. I mean, we just got to acknowledge those days are gone. That world has washed away. We are in a world of complexity and our jobs have changed and we've got to change with them.
So, as we wrap up here, Dianna, you've been very gracious with your time today. If I were a listener, I would be wanting to know how I can get more information on this coaching in the moment workshop, how I can get more information on Cilliant. So take a few minutes and tell us how people can get in contact with you, your materials, etc.
Oh, thank you, Carl. Yeah, right now, probably the best thing to do, reach out to me through LinkedIn. So Dianna Anderson at Cilient, Cylient.com. Or feel free to reach out to me directly at Dianna at Cilient.com is my email. You can connect. Happy to have a conversation with you. I am in the process of actually kind of revamping some things to really meet this moment in time. And so I'm going to have a lot more available in 2026. So I am, but right now, connect with me and you'll be part of the conversation as I move it forward.
I am delighted that we had this opportunity. I have notes on two post-it pads and on a white sheet in front of me of um, I do a leadership writing a couple of times a week, and I am going to reference our conversation, reference you, and reference several of your very good comments from my readers. So
Oh, thank
thank
you.
you for your time this morning. It has been a learning experience for me. And just to our listeners, if I could, I don't want to be pushy here, but this is one of the episodes that you really need to listen to when you're not driving to work and not on the treadmill. Have a piece of paper in front of you and take some notes. Stop the recording. These are some game-changing things, even if it's just the one metaphor of the knot. So thanks for being with us today. And again, Dianna, thank you for teaching us today.
Oh, such a pleasure.